Hey guys, Zane here with another One Take review, and today I wanted to talk about Elvis Presley's How Great Thou Art. How Great Thou Art tends to be the first album that people discuss when the topic of the culturally iconic Elvis Presley's gospel era comes up in conversation. Perhaps one of the most infamous sound change-ups in all of modern music history, the rebellious, youthful rock and roll artist Elvis Presley's decision to go gospel in the 60s is one that definitely polarized critics and fans alike at the time, and to this day still divides both groups, albeit to a slightly lesser extent than it did decades ago. The very existence of this album feels ironic in all honesty. It doesn't matter how spiritually or religiously devoted Elvis was to the music he was creating during this period of his career. He was still the man once decried by the older generation as being satanic or poisoning the youth with his slightly suggestive hip shaking that was absolutely PG compared to what can be seen today in the music industry, and to hear him creating music that is very obviously pandering towards that particular crowd is strange to say the least. It isn't exactly a fitting sound for the king either, because try as he might, the crooner behind How Great Thou Art is still the same man that once requested you don't step on his blue suede shoes. He's still the Elvis Presley of the 50s. The Elvis Presley of the 60s really isn't that much different. He's just trying to go in a more musically conservative direction, and it doesn't work out in the end. Perhaps it's because the majority of his truly legendary work stems from his era in the 50s, but I just simply can't shake the fact that this is the same man that covered Hound Dog and did all of these really rambunctious, energetic, even vicious songs for the time period that really blew a lot of people away. And now he's doing gospel, which, although a great genre in and of itself, this style of gospel is almost the antithesis of what he was doing before. While it isn't as weird as AC/DC doing a jazz record or Megadeth doing a country record, hearing Elvis take such a very conservative and harmless path musically is odd to say the least, considering he was considered the Antichrist of music at one point in history. It doesn't really help that Elvis and the majority of the sidemen that had backed him up on this album don't really add much to this particular style of gospel either. No one on How Great Thou Art sounds totally out of their element, but at the same time, they don't really do anything unique that you couldn't find on a plethora of other 60s gospel albums of a similar vein, and ultimately they fail to distinguish themselves. Now, Elvis himself was a major showman at heart, and it could be arguably assessed in a retrospective view that Elvis the personality and Elvis the figure is much more important than Elvis the actual performer. After all, he is considered one of the first individuals to truly embrace the classic rock star lifestyle tropes that have since been a part of rock music for decades. And of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, artists from Madonna and David Bowie to Trent Reznor and even more recent musicians like Isaac Wood of Black Country New Road have relied more on their personality and unique delivery style and aesthetic over their vocals to make up for a lack of unique or impressive pipes. Now, where the problem with How Great Thou Art comes in is the fact that this particular kind of gospel doesn't really allow Elvis to show off any of that personality that I mentioned before, leaving you with just Elvis the vocalist. Now, this has more to do with this particular form of gospel than the genre of gospel in general, as you can look back at artists like Mahalia Jackson and James Cleveland and see individuals that had such personality belting out notes and made some of the most powerful music of their time. It's just that this particular form of gospel, the kind of gospel that if it were less religious would easily fit on adult contemporary radio, simply doesn't allow for that. Overall, this more soft and nuanced form of gospel music, although done very well by some, definitely shows the cracks in Elvis's talent over a more energetic kind of sound. Still, How Great Thou Art still manages to succeed in the realm of grandiosity at the very least. The melodies presented on the album are at times genuinely lovely, and the backing vocals from the Jordanaires are quite excellent, if I'm being totally honest, with very harmonic performances that often outshine Elvis himself. Now, while there are a number of other gospel albums that succeed much more in this regard, it would be a lie to say that How Great Thou Art is a failure on all fronts, as compositionally, it's pretty solid. So, overall, How Great Thou Art is an album that is far from great or even pretty good, if I'm being totally honest, but it's also better than it should be, and I know I've sounded negative very in this entire review, but I truly mean that. The pleasant compositions and the aforementioned Jordanaires' excellent vocal work is definitely major highlight aspects of an album that is otherwise pretty predictable overall. However, Elvis's reliance on showmanship begins to really show through an awful lot here, as he isn't able to demonstrate what made him such a musical and cultural icon in American music history in the first place, which is why I'm going to give How Great Thou Art 3 stars out of 5. It's not a bad album by any means, but it's also one I would really only recommend for Elvis superfans. Whether you're looking for more rock and roll kind of sounds from Elvis, this isn't for you, and if you want to listen to gospel, then there are so many better options out there for you, but if you're really just a die-hard, I need to hear everything the man did Elvis fan, of which there are understandably many, then I'd say give this one a listen, but if not, then this one's definitely not worth your time. So again, 3 stars out of 5 because it's not a bad album. And with that being said, that's the end of this review, and I'll see you guys in the next one.